The words sliced through the air like a knife, cutting deep into my heart. "Your mother was my first mistake," my father Harvey declared at Mom's funeral. His arm was wrapped around a glamorous, much younger woman, and his voice carried an unmistakable note of disdain. I stood there, frozen in disbelief. The room fell silent, a collective gasp hanging in the air. Aunt Diane's hand tightened on my shoulder, a futile attempt at comfort. "Dad," I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing?" He turned to me, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. "Laura, meet Candace. She's my new beginning." Candace, all perfect teeth and bottle blonde hair, gave a little wave. "So sorry for your loss," she cooed, not sounding sorry at all. I felt my blood begin to boil. "Your new beginning? At Mom's funeral?" Harvey shrugged, seemingly oblivious to the horrified stares from our relatives and friends. "No time like the present, sweetheart. Your mother would have wanted me to move on." "Move on?" I sputtered, my voice rising. "It's been 3 days, Dad. 3 days." Aunt Diane stepped forward, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "Harvey, this is completely inappropriate. I think you should leave." "Oh, come on, Diane," Harvey scoffed. "Don't be such a prude. Elizabeth's gone, and life goes on." Something inside me snapped. I strode forward, my grief momentarily eclipsed by rage. "Do you even understand the situation right now?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "This is Mom's funeral, your wife's funeral, and you're parading around your girlfriend," Candace supplied helpfully, earning a withering glare from me. Harvey's expression hardened. "What? It's a new beginning for me. Elizabeth and I hadn't been happy for years. You know that, Laura." I recoiled as if I'd been slapped. "So that makes it okay to disrespect her memory? To disrespect us?" My father's eyes narrowed. "Us? There is no us, Laura. Your mother's gone and you're a grown woman. It's time we all moved on with our lives." Aunt Diane intervened again, her voice tight with anger. "Harvey, that's enough. You need to leave. Now." As Harvey turned to go, dragging a slightly bewildered Candace with him, I found my voice again. "Dad," I called out, causing him to pause at the door. "Don't bother coming back, ever." He looked back at me, a flicker of something. Regret? Defiance, crossing his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that cold mask. "Suit yourself," he said, and walked out. The moment the door closed behind him, the room erupted into shocked murmurs. I felt myself swaying, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on me. Aunt Diane's arms were around me in an instant. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured. "I'm so sorry." I clung to her, feeling like a little girl again. "How could he, Aunt Diane? How could he do this to Mom, to me?" She stroked my hair, her voice soothing. "Your father, he's always been selfish, Laura, but this is a new low, even for him." Uncle Robert appeared at our side, his kind face creased with concern. "Laura, honey, why don't we get you some air?" I nodded numbly, allowing them to guide me out of the stuffy room and into the cool evening air. As we stepped outside, I caught sight of Harvey's car pulling away, Candace's laughter drifting back to us. In that moment, something hardened inside me. The shock and grief were still there, but now they were joined by something else, a burning desire for justice, for revenge. "He can't get away with this," I said, my voice low and determined. "I won't let him." Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert exchanged a worried glance. "Laura," Aunt Diane began cautiously, "I know you're hurting, but no," I cut her off. "He's gone too far this time. He's wrecked our family for the last time." I turned to face them. My jaw set. "I'm going to make him pay for what he's done to Mom, to all of us." As the words left my mouth, I saw the concern in their eyes deepen. But I didn't care. In that moment, standing outside my mother's funeral while my father drove off with his new girlfriend, I made a vow. Harvey Miller was going to regret the day he decided to betray us. And I, Laura Miller, was going to be the one to make sure of it. The boxes felt heavier than they should as I lugged them into Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert's guest room. Each one was filled with memories of a life I was leaving behind, a life that had shattered like glass at my mother's funeral. "Need any help, sweetheart?" Aunt Diane's voice floated up the stairs. "I'm okay," I called back, but my voice cracked, betraying me. Footsteps on the stairs, and then Aunt Diane was there, her arms around me. I melted into her embrace, feeling like a little girl again. "Oh, Laura," she murmured, stroking my hair. "It's okay to not be okay, you know." I pulled back, wiping my eyes. I can't believe he did this, that he's just gone. Aunt Diane's face hardened. Your father made his choice, Laura, and it wasn't us. It wasn't you. A knock at the door interrupted us. Uncle Robert poked his head in, his kind eyes crinkling with concern. Everything all right in here? I managed a weak smile. Getting there. He came in, carrying a tray with steaming mugs. Thought you ladies might need some tea. It's your mom's favorite blend, Laura. The scent hit me, and suddenly I was back in our kitchen, Mom laughing as she poured us both a cup. The tears came then, hot and fast. Oh, honey, Aunt Diane said, pulling me close again. Let it out. It's okay. Uncle Robert set the tray down and joined us, his strong arms encircling us both. We stayed like that for a long moment, their love surrounding me like a warm blanket. Finally, I pulled away, wiping my eyes. Thank you, I said softly, both of you. I don't know what I'd do without you. Aunt Diane squeezed my hand. You're family, Laura. This is what family does. Real family, I said, a hint of bitterness creeping into my voice. Uncle Robert's face grew serious. Laura, about your father? He's not my father, I cut in, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. Not anymore. My only father figure is you, Uncle Robert. A look passed between Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert, a mix of concern and something else. Hope? We're here for you, Laura, Uncle Robert said gently. Whatever you need. I nodded, feeling a sudden surge of determination. What I need is to start over, to build a new life without him. Aunt Diane smiled, a fierce pride in her eyes, and that's exactly what you're going to do, starting right now. Over the next few days, I threw myself into settling into my new home. Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert gave me space when I needed it, but were always there with a hug or a cup of tea when the grief hit hard. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Aunt Diane broached a subject I'd been avoiding. Laura, honey, she began cautiously, have you thought about what you want to do with your mom's things? I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. I hadn't really. Uncle Robert reached over and patted my hand. There's no rush, sweetheart. We just thought you might want to go through some of it, maybe find some things to keep here. I nodded slowly, the idea taking root. That might be nice, actually. The next day we drove to my old house. As we pulled up, I saw a familiar car in the driveway. My stomach clenched. Is that? Aunt Diane's voice trailed off. Before I could answer, the front door opened. Harvey stepped out, Candace trailing behind him. Laura, he called, his voice jovial as if nothing had happened. I was hoping you'd stop by. We need to talk about the house. I felt my blood begin to boil. We don't need to talk about anything, I spat. Harvey's face darkened. Now, listen here. But Aunt Diane was already out of the car, placing herself between us. Harvey, she said, her voice ice-cold, you need to leave. Now. As they argued, I stood there, trembling with rage and grief. This house, my childhood home, was now tainted by his presence, by his betrayal. In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't let him take this from me, too. I wouldn't let him destroy one more piece of my mother's memory. I'm keeping the house, I declared, my voice ringing out clear and strong. It's mine now. And you? You're not welcome here, ever again. I was just settling into my new routine at Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert's when the first cracks in Harvey's perfect new life began to show. It started with a frantic phone call one evening. Laura, please, I need your help. Harvey's voice crackled through the speaker, desperation evident. I felt my jaw clench. What do you want? It's Candace, he said, his voice breaking. She's left me, cleaned out my bank account and disappeared. A cold satisfaction washed over me. And how is that my problem? Laura, please, I'm your father. No, I cut him off, my voice as sharp as a knife. My only father figure is Robert. You made your choice, Harvey. Now live with it. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. Aunt Diane appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. Everything okay, honey? I nodded, forcing a smile. Just taking out the trash. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove that I didn't need Harvey or his drama. But fate had other plans. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I ran into my grandfather, James, at the local coffee shop. His face was grim as he motioned me over. Laura, he said, his voice low, there's something you should know. It's about your father. My stomach clenched. What's he done now? James sighed heavily. He's been embezzling from the company. We've got proof. I'm firing him today. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I knew Harvey was selfish, but this was a new low. I'm so sorry, Grandpa, I whispered. He patted my hand. It's not your fault, dear, but I thought you should hear it from me first. As if on cue, a commotion erupted outside. We turned to see Harvey being escorted out of the family business building across the street, his face red with rage. You can't do this to me, he shouted. I built this company. My grandfather stood, his face set in stone. Excuse me, Laura. I need to handle this. I watched as he strode across the street, every inch the family patriarch. Harvey, his voice boomed, silencing the growing crowd. You've been an embarrassment to this company and this family for far too long. It ends now. Harvey's eyes locked with mine through the coffee shop window. The desperation I saw there sent a chill down my spine. That night, as I recounted the day's events to Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Harvey. Pleas for help, promises to change, threats of revenge, each more unhinged than the last. You need to block his number, Uncle Robert said firmly. I nodded, my finger hovering over the block button. But something stopped me, a morbid curiosity perhaps, or maybe a lingering shred of daughterly concern. I want to see how far he'll fall, I admitted, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert exchanged a worried glance. Laura, Aunt Diane began gently, I understand you're angry, but revenge isn't the answer. I looked up at her, feeling a surge of determination. This isn't about revenge, Aunt Diane. It's about justice. For Mom, for me, for everyone he's hurt. As if to punctuate my words, a loud crash echoed from outside. We rushed to the window to see Harvey's car swerving down the street, thus narrowly missing parked vehicles. Oh my God, Aunt Diane gasped. He's drunk. We watched in horror as the car careened around the corner, tires screeching. The sound of impact came moments later, followed by the wail of sirens. In that moment, staring at the chaos Harvey had wrought, I felt something shift inside me. The last vestiges of daughterly affection crumbled away, replaced by a steely resolve. He's made his bed, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Now he can lie in it. As we waited for news of the accident, I realized that this was just the beginning. Harvey's downfall was picking up speed, and I found myself oddly eager to see where it would lead. The game had changed, and I was no longer just a pawn in Harvey's selfish schemes. I was ready to become the architect of his undoing. The weeks following Harvey's drunk driving incident were a blur of police reports and hushed family conversations. I thought I'd seen the last of him. But I couldn't have been more wrong. It started with a text message. I need to see you, Laura, please. I ignored it, of course. Then came the emails, the voicemails, each more desperate than the last. I blocked his number, but somehow he always found a way through. One evening, as I was leaving work, I spotted a familiar figure lurking near my car. My heart raced as I recognized Harvey, looking disheveled and wild-eyed. Laura, he called out, stumbling towards me. Please, just talk to me. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking. Stay away from me, Harvey. I mean it. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. I'm your father. You can't just cut me out of your life. As I wrenched free, anger surging through me. Watch me, I spat, jumping into my car and speeding away, leaving him shouting in the parking lot. That night, I paced in Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert's living room, recounting the incident. This has gone too far, Uncle Robert said, his face grim. We need to get a restraining order. Aunt Diane nodded, pulling me into a hug. We'll protect you, sweetheart, whatever it takes. But as the days passed, Harvey's desperation seemed to grow. He showed up at my favorite coffee shop, my gym, even outside Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert's house. It was like he was everywhere, a constant shadow looming over my life. The final straw came during a family dinner at my grandparents' house. We were just sitting down to eat when the doorbell rang. Grandpa James answered it, and I heard Harvey's slurred voice. Where is she? Where's my daughter? I froze, my fork clattering to the plate. Aunt Diane squeezed my hand as raised voices echoed from the foyer. You're not welcome here, Harvey, Grandpa James said firmly. Leave now, or I'm calling the police. You can't keep her from me, Harvey shouted. Laura, I know you're in there. Something in me snapped. I stood up, ignoring the protests of my family, and marched to the front door. What do you want? I demanded, facing Harvey for the first time in weeks. He looked terrible, unshaven, clothes rumpled off, eyes bloodshot. Laura, he said, his voice breaking. I need your help. Candace, she took everything. I've got nothing left. For a moment I felt a flicker of pity. Then I remembered everything he'd done, every cruel word and selfish action. You've got nothing left because you threw it all away, I said coldly. You chose this, Harvey. Now live with it. His face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little... He lunged forward, but Grandpa James and Uncle Robert were there in an instant, holding him back. That's it, Grandpa James growled. I'm calling the police. As they wrestled Harvey away from the door, he shouted, You'll regret this, Laura. I'll make you pay. The door slammed shut, muffling his threats. I stood there, shaking, as Aunt Diane wrapped her arms around me. It's okay, she murmured. You're safe now. But I didn't feel safe. I felt angry, furious. This man, who was supposed to be my father, had terrorized me, stalked me, and now threatened me. And for what? Because I refused to enable his selfish behavior? In that moment, something hardened inside me. I turned to my family, my voice steady and cold. I want to press charges, I said, for harassment, stalking, everything. I want to make sure he can never do this to anyone else again. Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert exchanged a look, then nodded. We'll support you, whatever you decide, Uncle Robert said. As we waited for the police to arrive, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about making sure Harvey faced consequences for his actions, once and for all. He's wrecked enough lives, I told Aunt Diane, my resolve strengthening with each word. It's time to put an end to this for good. Little did I know, this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. The real battle was just beginning. The restraining order against Harvey brought a temporary sense of peace, but it also ignited a fire within me. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more I needed to do. Not just for myself, but for Mom's memory. That's when the idea hit me. I'd use my graphic design skills to create a public art project dedicated to Mom. It would be my way of honoring her, of showing the world the amazing woman she was, the woman Harvey had tried so hard to erase. I threw myself into the project, working late into the night. Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert were supportive, but I could see the worry in their eyes. Don't let this consume you, Laura, Aunt Diane cautioned one evening. Your mother wouldn't want that. I nodded, but inside, I knew this was something I had to do. It was more than just art, it was my way of fighting back. As the project took shape, it started to gain attention. Local newspapers ran stories, and soon, a reporter from the city's major news station reached out for an interview. The day of the interview, I stood in front of my creation, a massive mural depicting Mom's life full of color and joy. The reporter, Sarah, smiled warmly as the cameras rolled. Laura, this is truly breathtaking, she said. What inspired you to create this? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. My mother was an incredible woman, I began. She faced so many challenges, but she never lost her spark. This mural is my way of ensuring her light continues to shine. Sarah nodded encouragingly. And your father? How does he feel about this project? The question caught me off guard. I hesitated, then decided to be honest. My father, he's not a part of my life anymore. But my mother will forever be my inspiration. As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Harvey might be out of my life, but he was still out there, watching. And I'd just poked the bear. Sure enough, the next day as I arrived at the mural site to continue work, I found it vandalized. Red paint was splashed across Mom's face, and crude words were scrawled at the bottom. My heart sank as I read them. Lies and slander, HM. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face. All that work, all that love, destroyed in an act of petty revenge. But as I knelt there, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been hurt by someone like Harvey, every child who'd had to watch their parent tear apart their family. I stood up, wiping my tears away. You won't win, I whispered, determination stealing my voice. Not this time. I called Aunt Diane, my voice shaking but resolute. I need your help, I said. We're going to rebuild this mural, bigger and better than before. And we're going to tell the whole truth, about Mom, about Harvey, about everything. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Aunt Diane's voice came through, strong and sure. We're with you, Laura, all the way. As word spread about the vandalism, something incredible happened. People from all over the community came forward, offering help, supplies, and their own stories of resilience. The project was no longer just about Mom. It had become a symbol of hope for everyone who'd ever faced adversity. Standing in front of the half-ruined mural, surrounded by volunteers eager to help rebuild, I made a decision. This wasn't just about exposing Harvey anymore. It was about reclaiming our narrative, about showing the world that love and community could triumph over cruelty and selfishness. "Let's get to work," I said, picking up a paintbrush. As we began to restore the mural, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. Harvey had tried to silence us, to erase our story. But with every brushstroke, we were writing a new chapter, one he couldn't touch. The battle was far from over, but for the first time I truly believed we could win. And I was ready to fight with everything I had. The night of the award ceremony should have been a triumph. My public art project had taken on a life of its own, inspiring others to share their stories of resilience. The local arts council was honoring me for outstanding community impact. It felt like a vindication of everything I'd been through, a sign that I was finally moving past Harvey's shadow. I stood at the podium, heart racing as I surveyed the crowd. Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert beamed from the front row, pride radiating from their faces. I took a deep breath, ready to begin my speech. "Thank you all for this incredible honor," I started. "This project began as a tribute to my mother, but it's become so much more." A commotion at the back of the room cut me off. My blood ran cold as I recognized the voice. "That's my daughter up there," Harvey bellowed, stumbling down the aisle. "My flesh and blood!" Murmurs rippled through the audience. I gripped the podium, knuckles white, willing myself to stay calm. "Sir, you need to leave." A security guard approached Harvey, but he shoved past. "Laura," Harvey called out, his eyes wild and desperate. "Tell them who I am. Tell them I'm your father." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. I could feel the weight of their stares, the curiosity, the judgment. In that moment, I knew I had a choice. I could shrink away, let Harvey's drama overshadow everything I'd accomplished, or I could stand my ground. I straightened my spine, looked Harvey directly in the eye, and spoke into the microphone. "You're not my father," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You lost that right a long time ago." Harvey's face contorted with rage. "How dare you?" he snarled. "After everything I've done for you." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Everything you've done? You mean abandoning Mom and me? Showing up drunk at her funeral with your girlfriend? Stalking me and vandalizing my work?" Gasps echoed through the room. Harvey lunged forward, but Uncle Robert was there in an instant, blocking his path. "That's enough, Harvey," he said firmly. But Harvey wasn't done. He turned to the crowd, desperation etched on his face. "She's lying," he shouted. "I'm a good father. I just need a little help, a little money to get back on my feet. Laura, please." I felt a hand on my arm and turned to see Aunt Diane beside me, her eyes blazing with protective fury. "You want the truth, Harvey?" she said, her voice ringing out. "Let's tell them everything. How you cheated on your wife for years. How you drained the family savings for your gambling addiction. How you've tried to sabotage Laura's career at every turn because you can't stand to see her succeed where you failed." The room erupted into shocked whispers. Harvey's face drained of color as he realized the extent of his exposure. "You're lying," he stammered, but the conviction had left his voice. I stepped forward, my voice trembling but determined. "No, Harvey, you're the liar. You've lied to everyone, including yourself, for years, but it ends now." Security guards finally reached Harvey, grasping his arms to escort him out. As they led him away, he turned back, his eyes meeting mine one last time. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You're nothing without me." The doors slammed shut behind him, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. I stood there, shaking, feeling as if I might collapse at any moment. But then something extraordinary happened. Someone in the audience began to clap, then another and another. Soon the entire room was on its feet, applauding not just for my art but for the strength it took to stand up to Harvey. As the ovation washed over me, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. Relief, exhaustion, a hint of lingering fear, but also hope. For the first time, I truly believed that I could break free from Harvey's toxic influence. But as I looked at Aunt Diane's worried face, I knew this wasn't over. Harvey's threat hung in the air. a promise of more chaos to come. I'd won this battle, but the war was far from over, and I had a sinking feeling that Harvey's next move would be his most desperate and dangerous yet. The days following the award ceremony were a blur of congratulations and concerned looks. I tried to focus on the positive, on the community's support, but Harvey's final threat echoed in my mind. I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't go quietly. It was a rainy Tuesday when the other shoe dropped. I was at work when Aunt Diane called, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Laura, you need to come home. Now." I rushed back to find Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert huddled at the kitchen table, faces grim. A letter lay between them. "It's from Harvey," Aunt Diane said, pushing it towards me. My hands shook as I read. Harvey had hit rock bottom, losing his apartment and what few friends he had left, but instead of taking responsibility, he'd decided to lash out. The letter was filled with threats to reveal old family secrets, things that could destroy not just our reputation, but Grandpa James's business as well. "He's bluffing," I said, but the tremor in my voice betrayed my uncertainty. Uncle Robert shook his head. "Some of what he's threatening to reveal, it's true, Laura. Things from before you were born, things we never wanted to burden you with." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What things?" Aunt Diane took a deep breath. "Your grandfather. He wasn't always the upstanding businessman he is now. There were some questionable deals in the early days, nothing illegal, but ethically murky." "And Harvey knows about this?" They nodded. "He was involved in some of it," Uncle Robert admitted. "That's partly why your grandfather kept him in the company for so long, despite everything." I slumped into a chair, my mind reeling. "So what do we do?" "We fight," Aunt Diane said, her voice steely. "Harvey's a cancer on this family, Laura. It's time we removed him completely." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. We consulted lawyers, gathered evidence of Harvey's past misdeeds, and prepared for the worst. I threw myself into the work, determined to end this once and for all. But Harvey wasn't done. He started showing up at my workplace, at my favorite cafes, always just on the edge of violating the restraining order. The constant tension was wearing me down. It all came to a head on a sunny Saturday afternoon. I was at the park, working on a new design for my community art project, when I heard his voice. "Still trying to erase me, Laura." I spun around to find Harvey standing there, looking haggard and desperate. "You need to leave," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. He laughed bitterly. "Leave? I've got nowhere left to go, thanks to you and your aunt. But if I'm going down, I'm taking you all with me." He pulled out his phone, waving it at me. "One call, Laura. One call to the press, and everything comes out. Your precious grandfather's shady past, Diane's little indiscretions, all of it." I felt a surge of anger unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This man, who was supposed to protect and love me, was threatening to destroy everything and everyone I cared about. "You're pathetic," I spat. "You think this will fix anything? Make anyone love you?" His face contorted with rage. "Love? I don't need love. I need respect. And if I can't have it, I'll settle for fear." He raised the phone, finger hovering over the call button. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down. I saw my whole life, past, present, and future, flash before my eyes. I thought of Mom, of Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert, of the community that had rallied around me. And I made a decision. "Do it," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Call them. Tell them everything, because when you're done, I'll still have a family who loves me. I'll still have a community that supports me. But you'll have nothing." Harvey's hand trembled, his finger still poised over the phone. We stood there, locked in a battle of wills, neither willing to back down. And then, just as he opened his mouth to speak, a voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Harvey." We both turned to see Aunt Diane striding towards us, her face a mask of determination. And behind her, to my shock, was Grandpa James. The final confrontation was about to begin, and I knew that no matter what happened next, nothing would ever be the same. The months following Harvey's final confrontation in the park were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional upheaval. But as the dust settled, I found myself standing on the other side, stronger and more at peace than I'd ever been. Harvey, unable to face the consequences of his actions, had fled the state. His last-ditch attempt to blackmail the family had backfired spectacularly when Grandpa James decided to come clean about the company's past. It turned out that honesty and a commitment to change were more powerful than any scandal Harvey could have drummed up. As for me, I threw myself into my work with renewed passion. The community art project that had started as a tribute to Mom had blossomed into something much bigger. People from all walks of life were coming together to share their stories of resilience and hope. It was healing, not just for me, but for the entire town. One sunny afternoon, as I was putting the finishing touches on a new mural, Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert surprised me with a visit. "Laura, honey," Aunt Diane began, her eyes twinkling with excitement, "we have something to ask you." I set down my paintbrush, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" Uncle Robert cleared his throat, looking slightly nervous. "Well, we know you're an adult and all, but we were wondering if you'd let us officially become your guardians." I blinked, stunned. "But I'm 32. Aunt Diane laughed, a warm, rich sound that reminded me so much of Mom. "We know, sweetie. It's more symbolic than anything, a way to make official what we already feel in our hearts." Tears welled up in my eyes as the full weight of their offer hit me. This was more than just a legal formality. It was a promise, a commitment to be the family I'd always longed for. "Yes," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I'd love that." The day of the guardianship ceremony was also Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert's wedding anniversary. As we stood before the judge, I felt a sense of completion, as if the jagged pieces of my life were finally fitting together. After the ceremony, we gathered at home for a celebration. As I watched Aunt Diane and Uncle Robert laughing with friends and family, I slipped away to my room and retrieved a card I'd been working on for weeks. Taking a deep breath, I approached them. "Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad," I said, handing them the card. Their eyes widened at the words, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then Aunt Diane pulled me into a fierce hug, Uncle Robert's arms encircling us both. "Oh, Laura," Aunt Diane murmured, her voice thick with tears. "We love you so much." As I stood there enveloped in their love, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain of losing Mom, the betrayal by Harvey, the struggle to find my place in the world. But through it all, I'd found something precious. A family bound, not by blood, but by choice and love. Later that evening, as the party wound down, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The night air was crisp, stars twinkling overhead. I thought about Mom, hoping she could see how far I'd come. "I did it, Mom," I whispered to the sky. I found my way. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice, filled with pride and love. As I turned to go back inside, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was stronger, wiser, and more at peace than I'd ever been. I realized that this wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. Harvey's betrayal had nearly broken me, but it had also set me free. Free to choose my own family, to create my own legacy, to live life on my own terms. I stepped back into the warmth of the house, back into the embrace of my chosen family. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and continue working on my art, continue inspiring others with our story of resilience. But for now, I was content to simply be here, surrounded by love, finally and truly home. As I closed the door behind me, I knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, I was ready to face them. Because now, I had the strength of my past, the love of my present, and the hope of my future, all wrapped up in the family I had found and chosen. This was my happy ending and my new beginning all at once.